welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. Today, I'll be going through the Traitor Legions, ranking them all by power level. Top tier, mid tier, or hot trash. While Heresy leans towards the narrative side of gaming, I know there's plenty of players out there like myself who want to make sure the army they're putting thousands of dollars into can also perform on the table. No one's having fun when you're losing game after game. Hopefully, this list can give new players an idea on which legions are easier to wield and which offer those experienced players who love an underdog a bit of a challenge. A quick note before we get into it, a subscribe and a like really helps us reach a bigger audience. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit those buttons down below. Also be sure to check out our affiliate link in the description. To get through all the legions, we're going to have to keep things pretty light. I'll be looking predominantly at special rules, rites of war, legion units, and, by exception, anything else that particularly stands out, such as wargear, advanced reactions, or unique characters. We'll be going in reverse order from weakest to strongest. So, starting with our least powerful legion, we've got the Thousand Suns. Now, I feel pretty terrible for the Thousand Suns, for the 15th Legion. They're such an interesting legion, both in the narrative and on the table, but they're definitely being given a rough deal in this edition. Starting with their legion rule, the Cult Arcana, while it sounds cool on paper and has the potential to be quite flexible, the reality is that you're taking psychic checks to gain benefits that other legions are getting for free. On top of this, of the 5 minor arcanas, I'm only really excited about 2 of them, the Raptora and Pavoni. And Raptora has a condition that severely limits its utility. If you're actually trying to use the Thousand Suns minor arcanas repeatedly throughout a game, you'd better be prepared for a number of casualties from Perils of the Warp, which just doesn't feel great. The Rites of War are a mixed bag for the 15th. First up, the Archaean configuration. Well, it just kinda sucks. The Castellax Archaea Automata aren't fantastic at, well, anything. And the ability to pass wounds from Perils of the Warp to 140-point models doesn't seem overly efficient, even with an extra save from Adamantium Will. The Guard of the Crimson King, however, is exceptional, but it is an all-in and rather risky maneuver. Deep striking is fantastic, and being able to deep strike 6 infantry units of your choice is super tasty. Fear is always appreciated. Can't go wrong with it. And while Sekhmet Terminators aren't particularly impressive, you're going to want to take some for flavor, so at least they're not taking up your precious elite slots. Now, unfortunately, their Legion units all seem rather weak or overcosted. Sekhmet Terminators are far too expensive simply for the opportunity to pay even more points to give them a psychic discipline. Probably pass. The Kenetai Occult Cabal are going to be great at mincing through enemy power armor, but cannot take a minor arcana. They do have a psychic power, and the one that they do have makes them just a bit better at killing those power armored foes. They simply don't have the survivability I'd want for 24-point models. And getting through power armor isn't really a huge challenge for the legions that needs solving with these guys. They get a Legion Contemptor Dreadnought that starts at 200 points and has to spend another 15 for a minor arcana, or a mighty 50 points to access the psychic power, and just comes with worse close combat weapons than a regular Contemptor. Now finally, you've got that Castellax Archaea, which I mentioned before and expressed my apathy about. For 140 points, you get mediocre firepower, weapon skill 3, and 2 attacks. Meh. The Thousand Suns' biggest redeeming feature, I think, is Magistus Amon, one of their special characters who makes a really interesting leader for a recon company rite of war. Yep, that's about as good as it gets. For these reasons and more that I just won't bother getting into, I've ranked the Thousand Suns in the hot trash tier for the Traitor Legions, where they're joined by the Emperor's Children. Now, I want to love the 3rd Legion. I want them to be good. I really do. But they're not. The Legion special rule starts by needing a charge, which isn't great, and finishes with a bonus 1 to their initiative. Look, in some cases, this will be absolutely clutch. Killing your opponent before they can strike back is pretty good, but in other cases, it'll do absolutely nothing. They also get a weird bonus to defensive weapons when making reactions, which might come up once or twice in a game, maybe do something, probably won't. So look, not a great start for the Emperor's Children. Their advanced reaction is embarrassing. It's kind of like the Space Wolves and Imperial Fists, but way worse. I don't know why they wouldn't just let them charge in the movement phase like the Loyalist Legions do, so unlucky Emperor's Children, I guess. The third's Rite of War are pretty average overall. 4 outflanking units for the Maro Skara is okay, kind of cool, but outflanking can be worked around when you don't have other meaningful movement bonuses to make up for signposting your entry point, and no, +1 to your movement is not going to get you there. The third company elite is kind of tragic. Not only a cacophony terrible, more on that later, but being given the opportunity to pay 30 points for some pretty limited upgrades isn't overly wowing me. Emperor's Children Legion units range from mediocre to downright garbage. Phoenix Terminator squads, they're fine, sure. But geez, they better hope they don't get locked in combat with a regular Cataphracti squad with power fists, because they're screwed. Now, at least they're pretty cheap. Palatine Blades are a foot-slogging close combat squad that can't take an assault transport as a dedicated option. Their charnable weapons are subpar, and without an invulnerable save, you wouldn't really want them fighting anything other than basic Marines anyway, and maybe not even assault squads. Now, I imagine they really need that +1 to their initiative they get from charging to be impactful. It's a shame Games Workshop took away their jump packs, so that's them. And lastly, there's the Cacophony. What a mess. Who in their right minds decided an Assault 3 weapon with Gets Hot was a good idea? Absolutely hilarious. Sure, they will kill a bunch of base Marines when you unleash with a full squad of these, but you're definitely going to kill a few of your own boys, and at 25 points each one hurts. Just 1 wound as well. Yep, okay. Now, the Emperor's Children special characters, they're all interesting enough. Fulgrim's fine, but the Legion just doesn't compete on a level playing field against the majority of other traders. Their one saving grace, I will say, is that the Emperor's Children miniatures look fantastic. Is this enough to redeem their unexceptional rules? In my opinion, yes it is. I'm starting an Emperor's Children army because they look so good and they're so much fun. Will they do really good things on the table? Not really, but I don't care that much. So that's the Emperor's Children. They are in the hot trash tier with the 1,000 Suns. Controversial, can't wait for the comments. We will move on now to the mid tier. And first up in the mid tier is the Sons of Horus, our first mid tier Legion, and coming in at number 7. We have, and I know this is going to be controversial, so hear me out. We have the Sons of Horus. All right, the 16th Legion, War Master's own. I'm going to put it out there. I think these guys are a bit average, a bit one-dimensional. I know they're the poster boys for this edition, but I'm not that impressed. First up, though, their Legion rule, look, it's good. It's really good, you might even say. -1 strength for your opponent in that first round of combat will make a difference. The key difference is that your opponent won't be causing instant death with Power Fist, Thunder Hammers, and the like. So Sons of Horus 2-wound infantry have that inherent and significant defensive bonus there. They've got this ramming thing going on. I'm not going to talk about it. Ramming. Come on, GW. No one's going to do it. Maybe they will. Maybe they do. I'd love to see it. I can't wait to see it. But what else do the Sons of Horus do outside of take a few hits before going down? Not that much is apparently the answer. So their advanced reaction, it's not overly inspiring. Only firing off if the enemy shooting at you is within 12 inches. And then essentially it gives you a return fire reaction at +1 ballistic skill. Now for a Legion that wants to be close combat focused, it's a bit weird. It doesn't seem that great, and it's got that real limitation on it. The Rites of War, they do have some decent effects, but they're also slightly awkward. So the Black Reaving gives you an extra attack bonus for charging an enemy unit already locked in combat, but then encourages you to take a very elite army. It also gives you the ability to deep strike Justarin Terminators, but then makes you take a Masters of Signal, meaning that if you take any more than a single unit of these bad boys in black, you're going to disorder your own deep strike 50% of the time. As I said, it's just an awkward Rite of War. Now, the Long March lets you outflank with a bunch of Terminators, those really slow-moving guys that your opponent can probably avoid once they see where your outflank entry point is. That's assuming it even lands where you want it to. And again, with that +1 movement, Games Workshop, please, listen, +1 movement that you don't get to take advantage of in the assault phase, or use if you run, is not good. So you'll need to take these guys in transports if you want a decent chance of getting them into assault on the turn they arrive from outflank, or even the turn after, maybe. But now you're looking at a Land Raider for each squad. And honestly, you're probably better off taking Pride of the Legion over this Rite of War and at least getting that line bonus. So look, Rites of War, tad awkward. Now, the 16th Legion's units are fine, but certainly not winning any awards. People like to talk up the Justaerin. I know they're a bit of a fan favorite, but honestly, the Kassoran Power Axe kinda sucks. And paying it another 10 points to give them a Power Fist brings them up to a ridiculous 60 points each. And for what? Yeah, they have Furious Charge, they've got an extra attack, they get to Deep Strike if they're hanging out with certain people, Abaddon. But look, they're fine. But they're not doing anything overly interesting or different than a regular unit of Cataphractii Terminators, who I'd rather probably save some points on and bring more bodies with. I do actually like the Reavers more than the Justaerin, but if you take them in bigger squads, which is kind of the whole point, you're taking the risk of running power armored Marines that are foot slogging their way across the table, though admittedly with 2 wounds, that missile launchers would just love to kill. I'd want to give these guys either jump packs from the Legacies of the Age of Darkness PDF, which does get real expensive real fast, or a Spartan, which also isn't exactly a cheap option points-wise. The squad has a bunch of options, sure, super flexible, but I feel like you're paying a premium in points to get access to those wargear choices that you probably don't even want to take. Once again, these guys are fine, Reavers are fine, but they aren't really doing anything interesting that your veteran, despoiler, or assault squads weren't doing potentially more efficiently anyway. So that's probably enough on the Sons of Horus. I feel like you get my point. They're fine. Horus is a beast, as you would expect, but geez, he's expensive. They do have some fun special characters. Their Warlord traits are pretty good. But overall, and where it counts, I'm just not sure they're better than the majority of the other Traitor Legions, poster boys or not. So next up, above the Sons of Horus, coming in at number 6, I've got the World Eaters. We're starting to move into the entirely decent phase of this tier analysis. So the World Eaters are a big fan favorite, and it's great to see them sitting comfortably in the mid-tier. These guys, lots of fun. They know what they love, and they're darn good at it. None of these tactics or subtlety, just blood and slaughter. So, the 12th Legion special rule, just a cheeky extra attack when charging. So, to be clear, as I said before, I'm not a huge fan of rules that only get off when charging, but when they increase your damage, potentially so significantly, I'll allow it. An extra attack is always better than any kind of modifier. I won't go into a rant on the topic or statistics, but this Legion rule is just so much better than something like +1 strength or +1 initiative. So they get a tick there. The World Eater's Warlord traits are all fantastic. In particular, I love that -2 to the enemy's leadership in combat is a thing that you can pull off. Just make sure you're picking on non-stubborn units, which admittedly there are a bunch of. Blood hunger and the extra wounds you're going to be getting out of it are also super tasty, and while I don't love the Ravening Madman special rule, at least from a competitive standpoint, the flavor is fun, and the ability to take chain axes for free across your entire army is very nice and very powerful. When it comes to the World Eater's Rites of War, they are both super solid and provide some nice benefits. Extra movement with more consistent assaults from Berserker Assault, or some pretty decent damage mitigation, and a cheeky gaining of line on your rampages from the Crimson Path. You can't go wrong with either. The World Eaters units are in the good category, not anything overly powerful, but decent enough choices. The Red Butchers are going to throw out a ton of attacks, and with Hatred, they're going to hit home with most of them too. Rampager squads, and they I did learn how to pronounce this and I've forgotten. It's like Seadere. Weapons, and very, very Latinish, can take on pretty much anything, and often at initiative step 5, which is really nice. Sorry there, Emperor's Children. Having the option to give them jump packs, even if it does get a bit expensive, is also really good. And getting a Land Raider as a dedicated transport option is a nice bonus, and less common than it should be for these assault units. The World Eaters do combat really well. If you're interested in just running at your opponent, tearing them apart, this is definitely the Legion for you. And while they may not be top tier, I think they're wonderfully focused and a fun pick for many players. Next up, we have the Word Bearers. Now, everyone loves to hate the Word Bearers, but I think the 17th Legion are actually looking pretty good in this edition. So I've ranked them as number 5 on the Traitor Legion ladder, middle of the road. Though it's important to note, this is not because of their Legion special rule, because that thing is bad. Stubborn is a great rule. Being stubborn with leadership 6 is not so great. Look, will it come up? Yes. Is it reliable or consistent? No. It's not the worst Legion special rule, but it has to be in the running. Same. Winning drawn combats, it'll come up maybe once a game, if you're lucky. If I'm choosing a Legion, I want their Legion rule to be on for as much of the game as possible. And in the case of the Word Bearers, you're really looking for those niche moments when it actually becomes relevant. So, what do the Word Bearers have going for them? Well, their advanced reaction is super spicy, essentially negating an enemy unit's shooting for a turn for the cost of a single model. I really like this, and you would be using this to great effect every single game. When it comes to Warlord traits, Unswerving Devotion gives your army some serious consistency when it comes to passing those morale and pinning checks, and the Warpfire Blaster for their wargear, it's a unique replacement for plasma guns, has to be one of the best infantry carried shooty weapons in the game. Throw in access to the corrupted unit subtype and the ability to take demons in your army, and the Word Bearers are suddenly looking pretty strong and doing some really interesting stuff on the table. The Word Bearers' Rites of War are both really nice. The Dark Brethren makes your army stronger as you destroy your opponent and can really be taken advantage of if your opponent is foolish enough to bring a few rhinos to the game. The Last of the Serrated Sun Rite of War essentially allows you to take a much more flexible drop pod army than what the actual drop pod Assault Rite of War does, with the added bonus of being able to take Galvor back, who are super solid as a unit, as troops. The Word Bearers' 3 Legion units are all great picks. As I said, the strongest of which is definitely the Galvor back. These demonically possessed fanatics are very different to anything else the Legions currently have access to. Movement 8, Weapon Skill 5, Strength and Toughness 5. They've got 3 wounds, Initiative 5 with 3 attacks. When you throw in their Tainted Talons, you got Rage 2, Feel No Pain. You have some absolute beasts that your opponent will have a lot of trouble dealing with, depending on how many you take. The Ashen Circle are a fun, unique jump pack troop and come stock standard with Melter Bombs, which are great for taking out Dreadnoughts, so keep that in mind. And the Maragal Dreadnought is just an absolute nightmare. It is a Warp-Corrupted Contemptor Dreadnought with Weapon Skill 6, 8 wounds. Those extra wounds make such a difference. And it's Initiative 5, among other special rules and weapons. The Galvorback and Maragal Dreadnought are what's truly placing, I think, the 17th Legion in such a powerful position on the rankings, and they may, in fact, even belong a little higher up. Now finally, the Word Bearers have a mighty 4 unique characters above and beyond Lorgar, each of which brings a host of fun and powerful options to your army. If you haven't had a good read through the Word Bearers rules, definitely check them out. They're a lot of fun to play, even if you're not a big fan of Erebus, and let's be honest, no one is. So that is the Word Bearers in at number 5. Next, at the top of the mid-tier, I've put the Death Guard. The 14th Legion's rules, they're kind of weird, considering their lore. I get why they've done it. They could have made some other choices, perhaps. But at the same time, excellent on the table. Essentially, non-cavalry or artillery get to ignore any modifiers or restrictions during the movement phase, such as difficult terrain, but including pinning. As long as they don't run or use alternative movement like jump packs. It is outrageous. But that's just the start. So Death Guard counters stationary when making shooting attacks. So infantry can fire heavy weapons after regular movement with no penalty. And the best part, in my opinion, is it allows vehicles to fire all of their weapons at full ballistic skill, no matter how far they move. Oh, and ignore crew stun results when moving. Just because. Now, there's so much going on there. Right from the get-go, your heavy support squads are the best in the game, and your vehicles are far more maneuverable than anyone else's. It's worth mentioning their advanced reaction, which follows this trend of uncharacteristic speed on the table, and makes a unit essentially fearless against a shooting attack, gives them Feel No Pain 4+, and lets them make a cheeky 7-inch move. There are so many ways in which you can take advantage of that move in your opponent's shooting phase, let alone the other 2 parts of that rule. I love it. It's really good. Now, while these 2 aspects of the Death Guard are fantastic, it starts to become a bit more balanced as we go on, which is why this Legion didn't quite make it into the top tier. The Death Guard's Rites of War, they're fine. The Reaping means you can just go all in on heavy support squads, it's a bit of fun, and hand out rag grenades to any squad you like, which is actually pretty powerful. Creeping Death, the other Rite of War, needs a bit of work to fully take advantage of. and has diminishing returns against an opponent that doesn't really need to come and dig you out of your deployment zone, but both are certainly playable. When it comes to the Death Guard's armory, alchemy weapons, they're decent. They'll do some great work in certain situations. But what's way more interesting is the ability to take toxin bombs. Certain units are going to really think twice before charging a Death Guard unit that can not only overwatch, but can further thin down their ranks with these ancient forbidden weapons. Just good. They're just good. Much like the Death Guard's Rites of War, their Legion units are in the fine basket. Death Shroud are just so outrageously expensive, though with 3 wounds and effectively toughness 5 against instant death, I get why. But unfortunately, Power Scythes, they don't overly excite me, at least from a rules perspective. I think aesthetically they look fantastic. Grave Wardens, they're in the same boat. They're a good enough unit, but you've generally got more efficient platforms to either do a bunch of kind of AP4, AP5 wounds, or to crash home with some Power Fists. I get that these guys do both, but I'd rather have different units doing different things. These guys' real benefit is that they'll be an absolute monster of a unit to have to charge, especially with toxin bombs. So yep, the 14th Legion, they're good, the Death Guard are good. I actually think they're really good, but are they top tier? Well, compared to the next Legions I'm going to discuss, no, I don't think they are, but let's put them at the top of the mid tier. So next up, moving into the top tier, who have we got? We've got the Iron Warriors. So, I think the 4th Legion has been rather underestimated in this edition, although are super popular because they're so easy to paint. They're not as flashy, and they don't have as many options as the other Legions, but personally, I think they're fantastic. So the Iron Warriors Legion rule has to be one of the most consistent and easiest to trigger in the game. You get +1 strength to all of your shooting and melee attacks that target a dreadnought, automata, vehicle, or building. Now, the building thing I'm not so excited about, but the other 3 are just so very nice. Dreadnoughts are going to be a scourge on the battlefields of 2nd edition Heresy, so getting a leg up against them is really handy. Getting +1 to strength against vehicles is very significant. It often lets you damage vehicles with weapons, often weapons with lots of shots that previously simply could not. It often means that you get the double the amount of penetrating hits on vehicles when you shoot at them. It means that even Land Raiders don't feel safe against you. Your missiles, crack missiles, have no problem stripping hull points off Armor 14. Now, I'm not sure how popular vehicles are going to be in this edition, but playing Iron Warriors, you can't help but smile whenever you see them across the table. Then there's a bonus against Automata as well. The Mechanicum book is just about to drop, and a strength bonus against those tough jerks in that book will be very handy. Don't forget, it's shooting and melee. It's really significant. Their advanced reaction can be so brutal, and though it will inevitably kill some of your own Marines, you don't even care. Double shots in a shooting reaction, so tasty. There's only really one Warlord trait that the Iron Warriors are considering, let's be honest. It's the Tyrant of Lysatra, and I'm putting that Warlord in with a unit of Siege Tyrants and firing 3 crack missiles all day long. It's so dirty. I love it. It's nasty. Now, next up, Shrapnel Bolters. One of the Iron Warriors' unique weapons, while rather expensive, give your tactical Marines, and anyone else that takes them, pinning. Never forget that you can pin your opponents with reactions, including Overwatch. Watching a unit go in to charge you, take just one little wound, and failing that pinning test to be just left out in the open for you to then have your turn and shoot the hell out of them. It's super savage. It wins games. Shrapnel Bolters are good. The Iron Warriors, rites, and look, they've got other weapons they can give pinning to as well. So that's Shrapnel. Shrapnel is good. All the Shrapnel weapons. Pinning is great. The Iron Warriors' Rites of War, they're not wildly powerful, but they're solid enough. Hammer of Olympia is my usual go-to for my Iron Warriors army. Fury of Olympia is just better than Fury of the Legion. You're essentially getting that extra shot even when moving for the cost of the reduced range of Shrapnel Bolters. A bunch of your vehicles, ignoring Crew Shaken and Crew Stunned, sure, that's alright, but you do get to reroll rolls of 1 to hit when shooting with shrapnel weapons as well. Consistent, if not overly strong. Now, next up, the Ironfire would be really good if the weapons on the Aquatus squadrons weren't just trash. The Whirlwind Scorpius, however, is super spicy. Can't take them as troops, sure. You could do some mean things with an army full of Shrapnel Bolters and Whirlwind Scorpius. That's not an army I'd want to play against. So look, Rites of War, they're good. The Iron Warriors aren't exactly spoiled for choice when it comes to unique Legion units, at least in the Liber Hereticus. They've got their Primarch, his Iron Circle Maniple, who are in the realm of decent enough, although their weapon skill does hurt them. But then they've got the Tyrant Siege Terminators. Now, in my personal opinion, I think the Tyrant Siege Terminators are the most useful unit in the entire game. Are they the most powerful? Possibly not. Are they the unit that will contribute the most to your winning condition for those missions? Almost definitely. The Tyrant rocket launcher is just obscene. And it gets nasty when combined with the Tyrant of Lysatra Warlord trait, giving them each 3 crack missile shots. If you give them a Masters of Signal, you can really make some friends hitting on 2+, and Night Vision, which they kind of ignore in their inherent rules anyway. They absolutely murder anything with a 3+ save and decimate pretty much any vehicle with their +1 strength from the Iron Warriors Legion special rule. They can shoot down planes, they can clear big trash units, they ignore night fighting, and they get free interceptor. And then if you get into combat with them, they still have power fists. Tyrant Siege Terminators are ridiculous, and maybe one of the main reasons that the Iron Warriors have made it into our top tier. So, that is the Iron Warriors, the first of my top tier legions, and an absolute monster to face on the table. Who comes next? So, coming in at second place, the second most powerful Traitor Legion, I've got the Alpha Legion. Now, while the Alpha Legion aren't the flashiest or the most straightforward of legions to play, they've got this devious internal synergy and considerable interactions with mission win conditions. They're certainly unique amongst the legions, and that is no more apparent than in their legion special rule. The enemy needing 2 extra inches for shooting, charges, and reactions is significant. It becomes a bit outrageous when you combine it with the multiple units Alpha Legion wants to be running that have Shroud Bombs, allowing you to really dominate the shooting phases in the first few turns. There's so many little bonuses that this Legion rule provides. One of my favorites is that you can move to within assault or rapid fire range of enemy units without triggering their ability to withdraw. The Alpha Legion can use this rule to really control the battlefield, and a clever player can take absolute advantage of it. Throw Rewards of Treachery on top of this, which is the ability to take a single unit that is normally only available to other legions, and you've got a potent mix. There are so many great units to choose from, and it allows you to really plug some gaps in your army list where the Alpha Legion may not shine. There's just some dirty units that I'm sure Alpha Legion players have already tried out that they're just going to stop taking because they're starting to feel bad. The Alpha Legion Advanced Reaction definitely deserves a mention. Being able to move 12 inches, even if you do then scatter, is so very, very useful, both defensively and offensively as well. That it enables you to hide out of line of sight and makes the opponent waste their units shooting is just the cherry on top. This would have to be up there with one of the most powerful advanced reactions in the game. Alpha Legion Warlord traits are all great, but I think the Mobius configuration is particularly broken. Essentially, it allows you to take an allied detachment that doesn't score victory points for your opponent, absolutely crippling them in certain missions, but also gives you an extra victory point if they all die. There are some absolutely wild things you can do with this, that it's loyalist and therefore gives you access to the generally more powerful legions in the game, is just an added insult to injury for any opponent that has to face this. The Alpha Legion Rites of War are both good, with the Coils of the Hydra allowing you to do some pretty crazy stuff, and the Headhunter Leviathan Rite of War being generally more useful for generic army builds. Both Rites of War are quite restrictive, however, mainly in their deployment constraints, so I think a lot of Alpha Legion players will choose more generic Rites of War. The Alpha Legion units are pretty decent, though not as standout as other top tier legions. The Linnaean Terminators, they're a bit expensive for what they do, but they do come inherently with line, which is going to be very handy in certain missions. They can also take a Conversion Beamer, which is a really strange choice for a close combat focused unit, But such a fun inclusion that I couldn't say no, and I've already built some with one in a unit. The Headhunter kill teams, they're a bit of a glass cannon with only a single wound and 3+ armor save. But look, they get a lot for 20 points a model. They've got Precision Strike 4+, preferred enemy independent characters, they've got access to free minor combi weapons, Bane Strike combi bolters, infiltrate, ballistic skill of 5. This all combines to make enemy warlords absolutely terrified of them. They also get cheeky 5+ breaching power daggers, so they can still do some work in combat if needed. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Headhunter kill teams, though they do take some work to use properly, and they won't shine in all situations. They also have Relentless, right? And I think the option to take multi-melters. So now you're giving them potentially sniping multi-melters. Love it. Love it. There's so much more to say about the Alpha Legion, but that'll do for now. They're definitely a thinking player's legion, but one that can do some truly abusive things when built and played correctly. Now finally, in top place, the Traitor Legion that I think is the most powerful, the Night Lords. Controversial choice perhaps, but I've seen what they do on the table, and it can be absolutely brutal. The Night Lords have a Legion special rule that at first seems rather ordinary, but the more you look at it and the more you build your army around it, the better it becomes. Firstly, it's on for both your shooting and melee attacks, much like the Iron Warriors. And secondly, it's not just +1 strength, it's +1 to wound or armor penetrate, which is better in almost all circumstances, instant death shenanigans notwithstanding. Big units, models with bulky and vehicle squadrons are your best friends here, and they're going to love it. An army built around this concept can reliably maintain that +1 to wound throughout the game. It's this whole little mini-game that colors all of your tactical decisions, and I think it's neat. I think it's really interesting, and it's a fun one to see on the table. I want to briefly discuss the Flaymaster Warlord trait before we go further into the Night Lords, as it has the potential to boost your Warlord up to Fear 3, which is going to be crippling for your opponent. The Fear mechanic is just so powerful in this edition, and the Night Lords have large-scale access to it. When you combine Fear with pinning to reliably shut off your opponent's reactions and shooting as well, ability to move, capture objectives, things start getting really interesting. This is where the synergy starts to kick in. So the Night Lord's Bloody Murder special rule gives you +1 to your charge distance and +1 attack if the enemy unit you're charging is pinned or falling back. To further diminish your opponent's leadership, you can take the Terror Assault Rite of War. Suddenly night fighting is on for the first 2 turns with a 50% chance for the 3rd turn. This takes a further pip of leadership off your opponent's units. Oh, and all your characters have Fear 1 as well. You don't care about the lights being off because you can upgrade any unit you want to have night vision with prey sight. Sure, it gets a little expensive, but totally worth it. The Night Lords absolutely own the darkness, and this army-wide theme is game-changing, often shutting down or at least diminishing large parts of your opponent's shooting. Their other Rite of War involves a bunch of psychopaths on bikes, including a Warlord made up of 5 HQ choices. Now, while it's not as outrageous as Terror Assault, I can't wait to see someone try this and get it on the table. It has so much potential, especially with night and fear shenanigans thrown in. Special shout out to the 8th Primarch, the King of Terrors himself, Conrad Kurz, who just gives your entire army the Night Vision and Bloody Murder special rules, and comes with Fear 3 himself. He can also make an entire army take a pinning test after seeing one of their units ripped apart. It's insane. Just being able to potentially pin an entire army is crazy. An army built around fear is something I'm very interested in, and I think it has the potential to be pretty much unbeatable when combined with some deep strike action. The Night Lords' unique units, the Terror Squads, Night Raptors, and the Kentika Terminator Squads, they're all absolutely fine. They all achieve what you want with this army, but generally need to rely on that night fighting, fear, and pinning synergy to make the most out of them. Throw in a Librarian Consort with the Telepathy, Psychic Discipline to lock this down, and you're really in business. You are going to struggle dealing with 2+ saves, that's probably their main weakness there, as the Night Lords revolve around AP3 weapons with Shred, which are great at doing what they do. But look, it's nothing a few cheeky Contempted Dreadnoughts can't fix. So there you have it, my top pick for the Traitor Legions, the devious Night Lords playing their own game of shadows and fear. And that brings us to the end of our Heresy chats for today. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments how you would rank the Traitor Legions and whether you think the Night Lords deserve the top spot. Tell me, which other legions would you swap around? Importantly, make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting hyped for Heresy.